Hello, my name's Owen Ward from the English Language Unit, and I have a speech for you. You don't have to start interpreting just yet, don't worry. I'm going to give you an introduction and some useful vocabulary. So my speech is about cults and about the characteristics of cults. I'll give you some general vocabulary, so obviously a cult. Some general religious vocabulary will come up, like Christianity, Judaism, Jesus Christ, Messiah. I talk about the Vietnam War. I also talk about the Civil Rights Movement, which was a reaction to the war in the United States. Indoctrination, I use the verb to prey on, and I also speak about peer pressure. So without further ado, I'll get started. My speech begins now. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's fair to say that we live in a complex world with a lot of abstract concepts. It can sometimes be difficult to define these concepts. It's also quite tricky sometimes to draw a distinction between two similar concepts. Take the example of language and dialect, for example. There are some people who say that a dialect is, or rather a language, is just a dialect which is backed up by a number of institutions, like an army or a government. The same could be said for religions and cults. There are some scholars who say that a religion is just a cult which has been around for a long time. Some modern religions, like Judaism or Christianity, were considered to be cults at the time when they started out. With the example of Christianity, Jesus Christ was just one of around 12 leaders who claimed to be the Messiah. Now, cults can spring up anywhere around the world, but I think we can say that the United States, with its long history of religious tolerance, is particularly fertile ground for cults. It's hard to say exactly how many cults there are out there, but there's an estimate in the United States that there's anywhere between 2,000 and 5,000 cults, so a huge number, I think we can agree. These cults have often emerged in turbulent times. We can think in particular of the 1960s and 1970s. This was a time when the United States was going through a lot of changes, generational changes, the conflict in Vietnam, the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, which sprang up in response to the war and the rights movements to gain more rights for, say, African Americans. So in this speech, I would like to explore some of the characteristics of a cult and also talk about how cult members and cult leaders recruit new people into their cult. Now, there are three main characteristics of a cult. First of all, there's usually a charismatic leader at the head of the cult. This is an authority figure who demands respect and claims to be representing God on earth. So the words that come out of his mouth, and I say his because they're usually men, the words that come out of his mouth come directly from God. The second characteristic is indoctrination, or some degree of mind control. As the words from the leader come directly from God, the idea is that if you believe in God and if you believe in the Bible, then you should absolutely believe what the leader tells you and follow their instructions. The third characteristic is that there's a degree of exploitation. Now, this exploitation can take different forms. It can be sexual exploitation, meaning that some of the younger members of the cult, usually young females, have to have sex with the cult leader. It could also be financial exploitation. In some cults, for example, you have to hand over all your money to the cult. Anything that you earn goes to the cult. And then you also need to spend some time recruiting new followers. This is a commitment that you make when you join the cult. So we can see here that there's a degree of manipulation. That is really the key to a cult. It's not based on belief, it's based on manipulation. And this manipulation takes a number of different forms as well. Often cult leaders prey on vulnerable people at a difficult time in their life or an important time in their life. For example, when young people leave home for the first time, if someone loses their job, it means that they're more vulnerable to being manipulated and being recruited for a cult. The second form of manipulation is that the cult leader creates a new reality for the person. They isolate their followers from the outside world and tell them how dangerous the outside world is. They're much safer inside the cult, of course. The third form is that they emphasize the importance of having a good relationship with the leader. You really need to be on the leader's good side. And finally, there's a form of peer pressure. So this means that everyone in the cult believes the same thing, and if you don't believe the same thing, you stand out. We all want to fit in, of course. Now, cults may seem like a throwback to the 1970s, but there are plenty of cults still out there today. There's a lack of a sense of community out there. People don't feel like they belong to society anymore. And that means that cults are once again on the rise, but that they're taking different forms this time. There are many online gurus and cult leaders who post videos on YouTube, for example, trying to influence people and to gain control. And of course, on YouTube, you can just watch one video after another. It's very compulsive, it's very addictive. So that means that people are becoming radicalized. However, there is hope on the horizon. Many people end up leaving cults. There are a few reasons for this. The leader doesn't turn out to be what they pretended to be. There's a degree of hypocrisy. They see that the leader or the members say one thing, but do the opposite. Or sometimes people have a glimpse of reality. They leave this constructed reality and see the real world and would much rather live in the real world. So in conclusion, I hope you found this speech interesting, and I would just like to give you one tip before I go. Beware of charismatic people coming into your life claiming that they can make everything better. Thank you very much for your attention.